So much for joining us today. I was just reviewing your LinkedIn and all the things that you've been involved with. And as I was just sharing, it's so impressive. So National Board, you were on the National Board of Financial Planners
Mhm.
for several years, and then
Yep.
one of the 25 most influential people in financial planning. I think it was twice. Is that right? So
Yeah, I think so. Yes,
I,
pretty
I
much.
was it's like the list keeps going, influential practice management awards, and then an author. And
Cool.
I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you've had such an incredible career that has not only been recognized, but have been able to add so much to this space and what's going on. And so really appreciate your time, and I'm excited to hear from
Oh,
you
thank
today.
you.
So um,
Sorry, I think if you just stick around long enough, people have to acknowledge you for something. That's been my strategy all along.
well, it's working, and I love to see great work acknowledged. Is so important. So, and wanted to give a brief introduction there just for folks that
Yep,
are listening. So, it seems like the sweet spot here, a lot of it is around, practice management and all kinds of research. And I'd love to hear more about, we'll start there. We'll start with
sure.
that. I know that you've looked a lot into client engagement. You've talked with tons of advisors and firms about kind of their secret sauce and what works really,
Yep.
really well for them. And what's kind of the umbrella? What are you seeing with firms over the years and growth and what works? So,
Yeah, so our focus is very much in that spot of client experience and client engagement. And you're right, we gather our insights not just from talking to advisors, of course, which we do every day, but from an industry investor study that we do every year. And then our day-to-day work, which is gathering input on behalf of advisors from their clients. So every day we're given this glimpse into that particular piece of it. And the whole concept of engagement has changed a little over the years. I mean, and we're really on a soapbox at the moment because I feel like we've been using this word client engagement for so long. It hasn't had much meaning for people, frankly. Everybody has their own definition of what engagement is, and so they're right, I guess, if there's no agreed on definition. So a lot of the work that we've been doing lately, just to kind of give you a little context for that question, is to say, well, what is the definition of engagement? Can we actually have a clear definition? Is it defensible, as in, does it actually lead to business outcomes that we're trying to achieve and client outcomes? And then is it actionable? So when we've been looking at the research over the last year, that's really where we've started digging in. And we've been able to really demonstrate that yes, there's a definition. It's, the definition that we use as an engaged client is the most satisfied, 5 out of 5, and they've provided a referral. And then
mhm,
when we dug into that, we could see that they were more loyal, that they provided all the referrals, that they were more satisfied with investment performance, as in, like, the flip side being they felt like they were getting more value from advice, and clients were more confident about their financial futures when they were engaged. So all of this began to get us saying, like, let's get really specific about what drives engagement so
mhm,
that we can be more tactical about it.
mhm,
And we absolutely see some correlations in terms of what drives it, but a lot of it for us is sort of boiling down to this idea that we can all deliver great service. It's
mhm,
table stakes, understand expectations, meet or exceed them, you're good to go.
mhm,
But if you really want to engage, like at that deeper level, and achieve all of those benefits that we talked about, then it's much more about leadership. It's about
mhm,
the conversations that you're having with your clients, the kind of communications that you're sharing, and the extent to which the entire experience is designed, intentionally designed, to help them
mhm,
based on what's important to them. And
mhm.
so, this is what we're sort of seeing. It's kind of big picture questions, but then we try to drive down to, well, what does that actually mean, and
Okay.
tactically mean.
And what's important to them, specifically meaning the client, not necessarily the
Mm,
employee that's servicing the client, but really at the
yeah,
end of the day. And what kind
yeah.
of can you maybe give some examples of the tactics? And you talked about
Mhm.
leadership. Are there things that you're seeing firms doing? Is it the kind of value sets and how they're communicating, or
Mm.
are there specific technologies they're deploying, or things that are helping with that client experience, however we're defining it,
Yeah.
but really client experience as it does map to ROI. I'd love to hear a little bit of that side of the tactical implementation.
Yeah, sure. So when we think about it tactically in that sense, there's definitely examples. And you mentioned technology because I think that technology is allowing us to do a lot of this more effectively now. So that's certainly a big help. But you know, I would give examples like if you want to deliver good service, you understand that your client wants to meet twice a year,
Mhm,
and you reach out twice a year and you set a meeting and you have a good review and you look at their plan or portfolio and you follow up and you do all of the things that they expect you to do. That's good
mhm,
service. It's what they expect.
mhm,
When we're seeing the shift to engagement, its advisors are saying, I'm going to do all of that. But what I'm going to do is try to co create the agenda
mm,
by getting incredibly good at teasing out what's on your mind, how you're feeling, your concerns, challenges, and aspirations. And then we're going to build the agenda around what you want to talk about, not just what I want to tell you. And
mhm,
so these are kind of subtle shifts. That's one example. And the theme of co-creation is sort of big in our world. Maybe a more granular example would be, we could have an advisor who has a great content strategy,
mhm,
right? Sending out great articles, writing blogs, doing all of that, in touch regularly. But maybe it's more generic content. Maybe it's content that the advisor thinks the
mhm.
client should find of interest.
Yep.
And then the shift we're seeing is actually asking clients what they are concerned about, what their interests are, and then being able to personalize the
Yep.
content that is shared based on that. So those are it's it's like tweaking how we service in a way that's much more client centric.
Yeah. Less about sort of your own headspace and more about
Yeah,
how do you get in the headspace of your client and
exactly.
basically serving up for them things of value. We see
Hmm.
that all the time too, especially
Yeah,
content brainstorms, is
yeah.
things that you may be passionate about, but that doesn't
Mhm.
mean that the receiving party is. So,
Mhm.
um, so interesting.
Well,
So,
and I think we have to be careful even in how we ask the question, because I've seen people talk about that, and then maybe they get a little better and say, well, I'm going to think about the last questions my clients asked. That would be good content, which is true. I think,
mm,
if these are the questions you're hearing, but often the questions you're getting from clients are still quite investment focused or planning focused. They're very granular and
right,
tactical, and that's great. It's never going to hurt.
right.
But if you could almost look inside your client's head and understand what was stressing them out and what they were worried about and what they were talking to their spouse about that night or the night before, and provide content that got at that stuff, like that's a whole different level.
Yep. I absolutely respect that. Easier said than done. So,
It,
um,
of course, there are ways to do it, but easier
yeah,
said than done.
absolutely. I love to hear because we talked a little bit about, client engagement,
Mhm,
leadership, serving the clients, but then the team, right? Because it can't just
mhm.
be a solo advisor that's spearheading
Right.
that. It's got to be the team. And are there certain things that you're seeing that help create that communication and cohesion within the team to be able to have leadership at various levels besides just holding that to one person, to help
Mhm.
it not just be the rainmaker or just the CEO, but really upbringing that culture. I'd love to hear if you're seeing
Yeah.
ways that that's carried out through training or what have
Yeah,
you.
yeah, for sure. And I mean, to me, it's a big question. It's an
Yes.
important question because obviously when that kind of culture is infused all the way through and it's being reflected in every part of the business,
Mhm.
then that's pretty powerful. And I think, some of the challenges that we see are is helping the team understand how their role connects to this idea of leadership, right? Because it's one thing, as you say, to sit down and say, well, I'm meeting with a client, we're talking about their life. The leadership opportunities might be a bit more obvious
Mhm.
than the receptionist, or if it's a paraplanner or somebody who's in the background. and one of the best ways that I've seen is simply helping the entire team. Like we're very big, obviously, because of our business, into formally inviting input from clients,
Mhm.
but sharing that with the whole team. So if clients feel concerned about their children's future right now, how
Mhm.
could we each lean into that? How can the marketing team find content on that? How can the receptionist find an opportunity to maybe chat about the kids when they come in? How can we ensure we built that into the plans, right? We're just, it's almost like taking the key challenges and concerns and then looking at how that might filter throughout the entire organization. That takes intention and it takes
Absolutely.
focus. It's not just going to happen, but I think it's a powerful exercise.
Absolutely. Oh, I love that example. You can see how it can transcend, and it really bleeds into all different parts of the organization too. So, um,
Right.
so shifting gears a little bit, obviously it's been a kind of crazy few years with COVID. It's been
I'd say so.
stressful. It's been chronically stressful with
Mhm.
so many political and culture, all kinds of things going on. So, the markets,
Yep.
et cetera, how is that, or has it impacted the clients that you're working with? And has it changed really the definition for client engagement, or just really, yeah, has it shifted at all what folks are doing?
Yeah. It has, I think, significantly. And I would argue that there's always some form of uncertainty in our lives.
Mhm.
It's always impacting clients and what they're worried about. It might not be a global pandemic, but it could be a family health scare, right? I mean, sometimes it has the same impact. It's just at a very different level.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of these concerns have been there, but the pandemic and all of the other uncertainty that you point to has really put a spotlight on how clients are feeling. So we've been thinking a lot lately about how client mindset actually impacts the experience, or should impact the experience.
Mhm.
And even in the research, it's what's we when we went out this year to talk to investors, we were very focused on not just what they expect, but what they need.
Mhm.
And that took us down the path of asking them about client self-confidence, which is a sort of index that we track, the impact of uncertainty on their lives, the concerns that they have right now, and how they're experiencing stress in their lives right now. And it's probably not any surprise that it was pretty significant.
Mhm.
And even to this year, right? It's not as if it's gone back to where we were.
Right.
And so, I think that has, for those advisors who have leaned into this idea of mindset may influence experience, it might not impact how often I want to meet, but it's going to impact what I want to talk about when we meet. It
Mhm.
might not impact, my expectations of the material you send me, but I'm going to be much more impacted if you can send me the right stuff, right?
Mhm.
So it's it's been a fascinating ride for me looking at this data, because the other thing that I'm like very aware of as you look at it is that how I'm feeling, first of all, can influence my relationship. So, clients who are less confident in their financial futures, satisfaction tends to be lower, loyalty tends to be lower, all those metrics. So, there's like this positive or negative halo effect
Yeah.
on the advisory relationship. And that to me is an opportunity, right, for advisors to really lean in to understand, not just say, how you doing?
Mhm.
But to tease that apart, understand how clients are feeling, and have those different conversations, because we're seeing the impact just like all over the place right now.
Yeah. I love actually to hear about shifting the conversation too.
Hmm.
You gave the example of how are you doing, or other
Hmm.
ways to be able to say that, are we doing for you? How can we support you?
Right.
Those kinds of things. What ways, or are there further examples of personalization that
Hmm.
again help to kind of carry through what you're seeing and those emotions, either that the individual's carrying out or that you're seeing globally or through the data, that you can be more aware of that relationship to create more personalization.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that almost gets in our way with this issue is that I think as human beings, we're not particularly good at articulating how we feel, right? I mean, it's not always the problem of the advisor. Sometimes they're trying to do all the right things, trying to
Right.
understand how clients are feeling. But, if you asked me, if I sat down with my business, how are things going? I'd say, yeah, they're good. It's
Mhm.
good. It's, how the kids good. Everybody's like we're not dealing with any major crises, but it wouldn't take them to scratch too far below the surface to understand, I've got a 13-year-old son and a 90-year-old mother and a this and a that and a like there's all
Right.
of this. And that impacts my ability to hear advice, to take
Yep.
action, to think reasonably in a way. So I and I say all that because I think we have to be very clever about the kinds of questions we ask. So if it's just tell me how you're doing, you might get a good, yeah, good, fine. But if we can ask even things like, can you rate your level of concern on the following things?
Mhm.
Right. Now I'm going to give you a 1 to 5. That's easier than sitting down and you saying, is there anything that you're concerned about right
Mhm.
now?
Mhm.
Right. So if we can tease those out, does the plan reflect what's most important to you right now?
Mhm.
These are the kinds of questions that are preludes, I guess, to deeper conversations.
Mhm. I love that too, because it all maps up to what we started the conversation with, right? Which is around
Yeah.
how do we define client engagement and how is
Yeah.
that directly related to ROI? And what are ways that
Yeah.
we can do that subtly, either individually or through technology and such? So,
Mhm.
um, got a few more questions for you here. I know
Go
we're
ahead.
covering a lot of different things,
Yeah. Yeah.
but all related. So in marketing, of course, we talk a lot about really finding your niche, right?
Yeah.
And I'd imagine if you're looking at a firm at large, is that you can be more personal if you know a particular niche or if you're working with Gen X or whoever it
Mhm.
might be, right? You could just you can create an experience for that audience. I'd love to hear a little bit more about, do you see a lot of firms really going after niches? Or is there a way that, folks can choose a niche to be just more authentic or really to help support that client engagement being the end goal, right? Because that
Yeah.
impacts retention, that impacts the bottom line. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you've hit on so many of the issues 'cause I know you see this, I'm sure, as well. But so, I mean, one thing for clarity is I absolutely believe that this is a critical part of engagement, that in order to deeply engage, we need some focus. Otherwise, like diffusion is the enemy of engagement if we're just trying to be all things to all people. I
absolutely.
think you can deliver good service to a lot of different kinds of clients. I don't think that's a problem at all. But
Mhm.
if it comes to engagement and leadership and some of these other issues, you've got to go a lot deeper.
Yep.
So, that's my bias here.
Fair.
Um, I would also say that this is probably one of the hardest things for advisors to do. I mean, when I have
Yes,
these, right? So you see that too.
I
So
see it. Yeah.
it's when we talk, everybody nods and say, I get it, I get it, I get it. And then a fear of some sort takes over. It's like, well, what if, somebody walks away? Or what if my clients think I'm not focusing on them? Or what if, and what if,
Yep.
and what if? And I get that too. But, if I set that aside for the moment, I do believe that if we can, um, you know, if we really sat back and said, what if every minute of every day our team was focused on the needs, goals, and aspirations of a defined group? I mean,
Mhm.
wouldn't we come up with some really cool ideas and ways to support them? And couldn't we build the entire business around that, from the form of our communication to the frequency of our contact to the content to the digital presence to
Mhm.
all of that? I
Great.
mean, that becomes such a powerful attractor. Um, and one of the battles, I guess, that we see is partly in definition.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I'm certainly a believer that there's a difference between a target audience and an ideal
Mm-hmm.
client,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I could say I'm targeting business owners. Doesn't mean I target every business owner. My ideal might be a certain net worth
Mm-hmm.
or an investment philosophy or something. But I think we conflate those two things so much. And as a result, we get a lot of people saying, yeah, I have a niche, and it's, clients with $1 million or more, which we all know is not a niche. It's
Yeah.
just a wealth.
Yeah.
That's an ideal client. That's fine to have a target. And so all of that makes it harder. So I think there's some work to be done. It's like, who am I,
There.
who truly energizes me? Who do I want to work with? Who do I want to support? Who do I want to build this business to support? What's going to get me bouncing out of bed every day? Because
Yeah.
I just either love to work with these clients or do this work. I think specialization can be a niche as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, there's challenges, but we've seen it work,
Mm-hmm.
right? More times than we can
Yeah.
imagine.
And to circle back, I mean, at least from what I've seen, it really does take leadership, I
Yeah,
think to be able to make those play calls and champion behind them and put resources behind them. But when it
yeah.
happens, it can be very powerful. So,
Yeah, yeah. One of the things we've been talking to, use the word authenticity earlier, and we talk to advisors a lot about this idea of, we kind of call it the authenticity test. It's,
mm,
the idea is, first of all, that whomever you're focused on has to be authentic to you, right? So
mhm,
if I say the words, I'm targeting clients with $1 million in investable assets and more, like, does that truly resonate for me?
mhm,
Is that inspiring to me at some level? And then if I flip that around, if that was the welcome sign on my door, would clients go, oh my gosh, they understand me? And of
mhm,
course they wouldn't in that case. So, but I think as soon as it's authentic to you, like,
mhm,
if you can understand why you want to target a certain group,
mhm.
usually that's the answer. Maybe it's, even if you picked a group like pre-retirees, which, some people, we kind of laugh because it's so big, but
Right, right,
I
right.
actually believe that if you did it well, like, they have a set of needs, they have a
That's
set
right.
of concerns, there are demographic issues, like, there's a lot that you could pick up. And if that's what compelled you, helping people through that phase of
Mhm,
complexity and
mhm,
and anxiety for some in their lives, all of a sudden that's very compelling, right? That
mhm.
can be the sign on your door.
It so is. So well said. So, um, it gets me excited. So, but you're right, because it's coming from a place of authenticity,
Yeah,
um, which it fuels passion, and so
yeah,
it's all interconnected.
yeah, yeah,
Okay, one last, I mean, we're about at our time here, but one
yeah,
last
sure.
question just to for folks to get a look ahead. I know you're doing research and you've got your finger on the pulse on a lot of different topics.
Yep.
Anything you like to share related to that? Just kind of look ahead or trends that you're seeing. Um, just yeah, to make sure that you continue to have your pulse on what's going on. So,
Yeah, for sure. And the we do this every year because we can see trends, and doing it over the last few years has been a real gift because it's
mhm,
given us this look into mindset.
mhm,
I guess the one thing that I've noticed that I might mention as a way to think about change in future is that a lot of the change we saw in the last few years has been to do with the pandemic, right?
mhm,
So obvious things like we shifted in terms of how we meet with people. We should, like, all of those kind of obvious things have changed. At the same time, and maybe we weren't noticing because the pandemic was so all consuming, is that the demographic shifts were having the same impact. So
mhm,
younger clients under 45 want to meet more often, want virtual, tend to use social, tend to, like, and so these trends aren't going away, right? even if you believed we'd go back to how some people felt pre-COVID, which I would argue is not happening either.
Yeah.
But it's being pressed in. Now we've got these demographic shifts, and some of the most significant differences we see are based on age. If it's
Hmm.
younger, it's about expectations. But
Hmm.
if it's older, it's actually about concerns and challenges and mindset. So I think we need to lean into demographics and think about if and how that means we need to segment our
Hmm.
experience a little differently
Hmm.
going forward, because it's very clear we're not going back to the way it was.
Hmm. Oh, so interesting. It makes me want to dig into the research and hear more of what's going on. So,
Yeah.
um, well, goodness, thank you so much for your time and for
Thank
all the
you.
work that you do. And it's really fascinating to hear not only what's happening today with, with the pandemic and what you're seeing, but then also just that bird's eye view of what you've seen over the years um and what works and what doesn't. So appreciate your time.
Well, thank you. Appreciate it.